So on to the next part, which is actually making the buttonhole. So this is my fabric, okay, and this is my button. And so I'm going to place my button around here, just for now. Again, this is a practice. I'll do it on the white piece to make it easier to see. Okay, so what I'm doing with my pen is marking at the top and also then marking at the bottom of the button, okay? And then what I'm going to do is just make that a bit more visible. Draw a straight line up. You could use a ruler if you're as bad at drawing straight lines as I am. And then just top and tail that with your marking like that. Okay, great. Then the next thing I need to do is just set that aside for a second and change the foot on the machine. So this machine here is a four-step button holder. So I'm going to drop off the original foot there, click on the buttonhole foot with the little grooves at the front, and then the next thing I need to do is then change the settings on the machine. So I need to go over to the dial over here and change it from straight stitch over to my 4 different steps for my buttonhole. So we've got the 1 which goes down, we've got 2 that goes across, and you can see that 2 and 4 share the same button, and we've got 3 then it's going to go back up, and then 4 is going to do the bar tack at the top. So because I'm starting at the start, I'm going to keep it at number 1. And then over here at the side, this is my stitch length dial here, and so at the moment it's sitting there at 2, and I'm going to turn it down to say 1 for, say, like between 0 and 1 for my buttonhole length. Okay, so back over to the sewing position for you. Okay. Now, underneath your buttonhole, you're going to need to use some support, because that's going to give, whenever you're opening and closing your clothes, it just means that your buttonhole will stay nice and strong. So normally I would use fusible interfacing, which would be fused to the back using the iron, but I don't have any of that today, so I'm using a fine gauze. Now, there's the selvage edge, so it is actually really tight this way, but it's also really tight this way. Okay, it does have the bias, which is nice and stretchy, so it doesn't really particularly matter which direction you're placing the gauze, but as long as you don't place it on the bias, and but that's your stiffness. Okay, then fold over. So this is all the reverse. Fold over to there. So remember, this is just a practice. Then we're going to take it to the front, and what I need to do then is line up the top of the little bar that I've made with this little groove in here. So I'll see that in a second. So I'm just playing about lifting the foot and making sure I have it in the right place. And then if I can tip the machine up to show you, you'll see that is where it is there. Okay, cool. Right, I'm going to lower my needle down and go for it. And then you can just see where you have stopped the line at the bottom, and that's where you will then stop your number 1. Make sure your needle is out of your fabric before you switch over to number 2, and then I normally count to 8 really quickly here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's really fine. Lift it up then, and then change over to dial number 3, and that's going to bring you backwards. So again, slow down when you can see that you're coming up to near enough the end of where you started. Okay, so I can see I'm coming up to that now, okay? And then lift it up and change over to your last one, which is number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now this is a little bit scant, this stitching on each side. I would prefer my button to be a lot stronger than that, even visually as well. I don't really like to see the gaps. So this is the nice thing that I like about the 4-step buttonhole, is that I'm just going to change the dial over to 1 again, and that means I'm going to come down this line. Okay, so I don't really want to do too many bar tacks at the bottom, so I'm just going to skip step 2 and go on straight to step 3, and then I'm going to go back this way. Okay, and that's us. So that's the buttonhole made. I'm going to lift up this needle, lift up the foot, and pull this out of the machine. Okay, so that's it out of the machine. So I just want to show you what is next, what's the next stages. Okay, oops. So at the moment we have a nice neat buttonhole, and that neatness has been really filled in with the fact that I've done that up and down twice. Now we do have a top thread, and we also have a bottom thread there as well. You can see that the back of it is just as nice as the front. Obviously my bobbin thread was in white. Now ideally what you are supposed to do is take these little random threads, thread them up with a needle and pass them through to the back, and then thread them up to knock them off. But life is short, as they say. So for now, as long as you have done a secure buttonhole, I would be happy just to snip that off. Okay, so we're going to snip it off there, and then go to the underside as well and snip all of that off too. Okay, so that's all your threads off. Always make sure your work is nice and neat. And there's your buttonhole. Now, this is when you're going to need your stitch ripper next. Now, in industry, and you can actually get a buttonhole. So there is a specific machine for every single job that for your clothes. So there is a particular buttonhole machine, and it also cuts the buttonhole at the same time. You can also get different sizes of they're called buttonhole cutters, and they're shaped in all of the different lengths, and they've got a lovely sharp blade on them. Use a hammer to really kind of just cut out the fabric, but we're not going to do that, and it just means that you have to buy one in every single size. So the humble stitch ripper will come in very handy. So the first thing I'm going to do, remember this is a sharp blade, okay, so please be careful. I'm going to plunge it through the front. Now before I plunge it through, I want to take a double check to make sure my finger isn't here when I'm holding it. So I'm kind of stretching my fingers like open. Okay. So I'm going to go in, and once it's in safely, as you can see, then I'm going to move my fingers then down. Okay. Now I'm going to send the blade halfway up. Okay, so it's halfway up now. Now, if I continue to go on forward, there is a chance that I could rip right through my buttonhole, which is not something I want to happen. So what I normally do then is stop there, and I turn it round, and I do exactly the same thing as I've just done. Now, the other thing you can do is actually you can put a pin here, which means the needle, this metal, won't go through the metal of the pin. So again, I'm going to plunge in the bottom, making sure that it's safe to do so, and go up. Now what I also do here is lift up my stitch ripper so that it actually can't go any further. It just goes out. Now this here, you will see the threads coming, okay? There is honestly not too much you can do about that. There's a product called Fret Check that you could put onto these ends. So that's why it's important, if you have a white fabric, make sure you use a white interfacing to support underneath. So interfacing just normally comes in grey and white. So for example, if you had a pink garment, pink fabric, and you didn't want either grey or white to show, then I would suggest using a little snippet of your actual fabric, cut on the grain to support underneath, like I have done as well. So just to show you, there's my gauze fabric inside protecting it, and that is your buttonhole. So the next thing we're going to do is just check that it feeds through okay, and hopefully it will, without too much squeaking, and also without, so if it squeaks too much it's too tight, but also you don't want it too loose. So there we go, in and out. Okay, so there we go, buttonhole done. And now on to how to sew on a button.